this video is going to be going over social networking and privacy. So the main thing we want to talk about with social networking is the privacy settings that we have on our profiles. So social networking covers social media profiles. It covers anything that might be showing what we call kind of our online resume online. And we want to make sure that anything that is out there for public eyes to see, that we're very aware of it, and that if there's anything that we don't want to be out there, that one, we're either really diligent with our private settings or we just don't put it up there at all. So our privacy settings, you can do this on your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, your Snapchat. All these different social media platforms have privacy settings available. You can also do it on different websites that you may frequent a lot. You can do it with your browsers, but specifically we're going to be looking at our social media sites. So you want to make sure that you have a privacy setting for who can contact you. You want to make sure always that it is people that you know in real life, just your friends, just contacts that you already have. This is important because there are many different ways that someone can try and contact a person on a social media platform, and there are ways that they can deceive a person. There are ways that they can set up different profiles that aren't even their own. And so you just want to be really careful about who you're letting have access to any type of your information, your photos, anything that you're putting out there. You also want to make sure that you have a privacy setting for your messages. And so you want to have a strict filter that says only your friends are able to message you. This goes for Facebook Messenger. This goes for the direct messages that you can do in Instagram. You just want to, again, have that privacy setting set to friends only. We want to encourage not only kids and youth, but also adults to delete any requests from strangers and any contacts that you don't know in person. Sometimes you may get a friend request and you have no idea who it is. If you don't, delete it. You don't need to add them. I think a lot of times youth and even young adults will add people that have searched them out because they have this idea of becoming an influencer, a social media influencer, and that's actually a really, really difficult thing to crack into. And so we really want to encourage social media profiles and accounts to be used for connection and not necessarily as a job. It's a very, very specific type of a job, and it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of kind of luck in order to break into that industry. And so we just want people to be very, very aware of what they're doing and how much they're putting themselves out there. Like I said, this goes not only for youth, but for young adults, adults that are trying to do this in their life. And always remember that if you do have a contact that is getting aggressive or maybe threatening, that you can block. If that doesn't work, you can report. And remember, a report is coming from that social media platform, so they're not going to know who reported you, but it's going to be somewhat of an anonymous report for you. And if that doesn't do enough, you should always contact your local law enforcement. Another thing we want to be careful on with privacy settings is our location settings. So this is geolocation. What happens is if we have the geolocation set to on, wherever you're at, whenever you take a picture and you upload it to, let's say, Instagram, it's going to show where that location, where your photo is taken. So if you have a public profile and say kids at school are taking pictures and posting up at school, the school has a public one, and so anyone can Google XYZ Middle School on Instagram, and what they're going to find is the name of the school, usually the address, because they're going to have a public profile as a school, as an organization. And then when they go into photos, they're going to see a cache of all these different photos that maybe the kids didn't post specifically to the school, but because they had their geolocation on, it grabbed it and put it into their public profile. So that won't happen if you turn your location settings to private or you turn your location setting off. On my personal phone, I have everything turned off except for Google Maps. And the only time I allow my location for that is when the app is in use. So we want to be really careful about when we're letting people see our location, because if your geolocation is on, you don't even have to put anything in. It's automatically going to tag it. As an adult, we want you to be aware of what you're posting. I know that a lot of times we get really excited. We want to share our accomplishments. We want to kind of do a humble brag on our kids, but we need to be very careful about what types of information or photos we're putting out on our social media platforms. It's never the best idea to put names out there. It's never a good idea to put where they're going to school, what grade they're in. We want to kind of keep it as general as possible. And that also goes for youth. What are you posting? Are you posting things that if it got out beyond your sphere of influence, it would be something that could be damaging to your career, damaging to future prospects, or damaging to you in a way that's maybe a little bit more personal? And we'll talk about that in our later videos about inappropriate texts. So we talked about if something happens, you can always report and block anything suspicious or anyone suspicious on a website or social media platform. One thing we do want to point out about social media, we want to be aware that everything online is not true. And this also goes for Instagram posts, photos that we see on Facebook, Snapchats, because there's so many ways to doctor a photo. A lot of times we'll be looking at influencers, or a lot of times we'll be looking even at our friends. And what we have to remember is that they will post highlights. They're not going to post the bad days. They're not going to post the ugly photos. They're going to be filtered. They're going to be doctored. They're going to be photoshopped, especially if it's, someone that has the money to do professional Photoshop. And so we want to be aware that there are photos out there that are going to make us feel maybe bad about ourselves, about the way we look, about where we're at in our careers, about where we're at with our friends. And we want to be aware that everything out on the internet is simply not true. Because a lot of times what happens is that this will raise the stress and anxiety of feeling like we have to have this perfect life put together and put it all out on social media. And that's just not the case. And I think we're kind of learning that specifically now with all this COVID crisis going around, that the truth is our lives can be somewhat boring, and that's okay. And we don't have to have these exotic vacation pictures. We don't have to have this perfect body, because we're dealing with life right now. We're dealing with something that is completely outside of our normal routine, and that's okay. And we want to make sure that we just recognize for our mental health that not everything that is posted online is the actual truth. There's a lot of filters, there's a lot of fixing, and maybe hours of going through different photos of this doesn't look right, oh look at this, my body doesn't look right there, my chin doesn't look right there, and then they pick the exact photo that they want, but that doesn't represent their real life. So even during this time of having an extended presence of home, an extended amount of access to screen time, we really want to encourage those that are under the age of 13 not to have access or to create social media profiles, or having apps that have any type of age restriction on them. What we typically say is that the internet was not made with children in mind. So there are so many different websites and people out there that don't necessarily care if it's a kid looking at their content or a kid that they're contacting. Hence, that's why we have the Child Online Privacy Protection Act that went into place in the 1990s. So we just want to make sure that even though it may seem like an easy fix to keep someone entertained or to make them feel not alone. We want to make sure that we're following that federal law because we don't want our kids exposed to something that they're not ready for. So the questions that are coming up on your screen, sit down with your kids and just simply ask, what social media platforms are you using? What do you like about them? How do you use them? Because each one has its own different way of being used. A very important question to ask them is, does keeping up with those social media profiles ever cause stress and anxiety? And if you notice that, how do you handle that? One thing we recommend is always having, if you have apps that can cause stress and anxiety, maybe have an app that can help with the grounding or meditation for a kid. There are tons of apps out there, Calm, there's breathing techniques that you can do. And so it's a nice balance of having ones that can cause a lot of anxiety and others that can help with anxiety. Asking them what are their privacy settings on their social media profile. It's a great question. They may not know. It may just be to a default setting, and then you can walk them through the process. You can always go to commonsensemedia.org. That's a great place to get any how-tos of how to do privacy settings, of how to do parental controls. It's a really great website. Have them sit down and show you how a specific social media platform works. If you know that they're really into Snapchat, ask if they can give you a demo on it. It's going to make them feel very empowered. They're going to feel like the expert in that situation, and they're going to realize that you have an interest in what they're doing. Then you'll want to ask if they've ever experienced seeing a post that's maybe concerning to them. Have they ever noticed that there was a threat towards a person or a place? And if they did, what can they do about it? Do they know the proper channels in order to report that? We want to make sure that they feel comfortable going to law enforcement or talking to their school officials, letting them know that those are the appropriate places for them to go. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight and some tips on how to handle social networking and privacy.